Hi, I'm Deb from Camp, and today we're going to learn how to make a jumping dino game using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Okay, so without further ado, let's start working on our project. First, we're going to need a code editor, and for this video, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. If you do not have that yet installed in your machine, just search for Visual Studio Code and click download here. Now let's choose the one that is compatible to our operating system. For me, it's Windows, so I'm going to choose that, and it should automatically start the download process for us. Once that's done, let's open the downloaded file, and it will open an installation prompt for us. Just accept the agreement, click on next, let's leave this in default, click and next again, and finally click install. I won't be installing this one because I already have it in my machine, but if you don't, please go ahead. Okay, so now that we have Visual Studio Code installed and running, let's go to File and open a folder. Now let's go to the location that we want our project to be in and create a folder right there. I'm going to name my folder Dino Game. And I'm going to select that folder. Inside our Dino Game folder, let's create a file and name it index.html. Inside our index.html, what we can do is type in html:5. This is a shorthand way of creating this initial boilerplate for our HTML file. Now for this project, we don't need to concern ourselves with these other meta tags, so we can delete that for now. And maybe let's change the title to Dino Game. The viewport or the actual page of our game will be coded inside here, the body tag. Now let's start creating our game. Let's create a div. And inside that, let's create two more divs. And then we just copy and paste this. On this div, let's give it an ID of game. And inside this one, let's give it an ID of Dino. On this last one right here, an ID of Bob. Now that we have our divs, let's just first create, let's say, a header here, and just check if our elements can be rendered out in our page. So for this one, let's just type in Dino for the meantime, and copy and paste that here, change this one to 1, and save our file. Now, the way that we can see it in our browser is to check if we have an extension called a live server. Let's check if we have live server. If you do not have this uninstall option right here and have the install option, please click the install option so that you will have it in your VS Code extensions. What that's going to do is allow us to see the changes in our browser. Now let's right click on our page and select open with live server. There you go. Now we can see that our elements, Dino and Bob, are being rendered out in our page, so that's a good start for us. Now the next thing we will do is create two buttons to trigger our game. Now let's just type in button right here, give that a closing tag, and name this one start button, or start game rather, and give this an ID of start button. Now let's create another button right just below it, and give that an ID of try again button. And of course, let's also change the text here to try again. Now let's save our file and check if we can see the buttons in our page. And yes, we can see them right here. They're being rendered out together with our Dino and our Bomb header. Now that we know that our elements are being rendered out, we can go ahead and change these things right here into actual images. So let's try an img and give it a closing tag. Now in our left-hand side right here, let's create a folder and name it images. It's a good practice to contain all of your images in just one folder so that those things do not get mixed up with other documents in our pages. And let's put in the images that we're going to use for this project. Don't worry, the links to these images will be shared with you. And the way that we can use those images is to actually give the address or the location of the images in our tag right here, which we can do by typing in src or source and type in the address. In here, you can see that it's already prompting us to type in images. And since this is the Dino tag, let's use the Dino image. And same thing here. Type in img, src for source, and type in the address. And the pop. Now let's save that and check if they are being rendered out. And yes, although a bit oversized, but they are being rendered out. So that is a good start for us. Now, whenever I start a game, I don't always want to be seeing everything right here. So for the meantime, let's make sure that our trident button is not being seen. So let's put in style and give that a display of none. This simply means that this element right here that we give in a display of none will not be rendered out initially, unless of course we change this. And let's give that same property to our game div. Now let's try that again. Save it and check it in our webpage. And now we can see that those elements are not rendered out anymore, and we can only see this start game button. And now we are ready to give some styling to our web page. So make sure that we are in our parent folder, and let's create another file and name it style.css. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it allows us to give some styling to our page. The way that we can make sure that our styles knows where to put the styling into is to link it to our HTML file right here. So let's have a link. And href. And let's type in the address of our CSS file. And since they are in the same folder, we can just type in the file name. And let's specify that it is a style sheet. Style sheet right there. And let's make this a self-closing tag. So now we can say that our style.css knows that it will be applying the styling into this index.html file. The way that we do styling in CSS is if we want to address, let's say, a tag. So we want to address a div or all the divs in our element, in our HTML output rather. We type in div here, and we type in declarations. Let's say we want the background color to be aquamarine. So that means that to every HTML element, which has the div tag, meaning all of these, will have a background color of aquamarine. If you want to address classes, we type in that and the name of the class. Let's say we have a class name which is game class. Game class. That is how we address classes. And if we want to address HTML elements via their ID, which we are going to do, we are going to use this sharp symbol or number symbol, number sign. And let's see what IDs we used in our HTML. Let's say the ID of game here. This will mean that any HTML element with the ID of game will have a background color of aquamarine. Difference here is that when we use IDs, we are addressing specific HTML elements, since IDs cannot be replicated, but classes can be and tags can be reused. Okay, now we've already prepared a styles for you, and let me paste that here. Do not be overwhelmed. This is just the same as what we've discussed earlier, which is we're addressing an element ID here and then making styling declarations inside this block. Now let's focus on this .animate right here, which we can already see is an element class. And inside this .animate class, we are creating a declaration of an animation, and we're calling this variable jump. We are stating how long the animation is going to last. In our case, it is 300 milliseconds. And we're also declaring the direction of the animation. Just on top of it is at keyframes jump, and then inside it is some other declarations. In our jump variable right here, we are saying that at 0% of the animation, which is 0 millisecond, the top position of whatever element is being applied to should be 150 pixels from the top. And that is the same upon the completion or once we reach the 300 millisecond time of our animation. And you can see here that at 30%, we are setting the top position to 100 pixels from the top. So it's like we are pulling it upwards just to give the illusion of our dino jumping, because we already know that the element that will be jumping will be the dino one. So some other animations will also be applied for the bump, since we want the bump to be moving so we can avoid it later on. Now that we've created our CSS file, let's save it and see the changes that we've made in our page, which is right here. Now you can already see that the styles that we've done were applied in our pages without doing extra steps. The next thing we can do is apply some functionalities in our site. What's going to happen after we click that button? So make sure again that we are in our parent folder and create a script.js file. The way that we can make sure that our script.js file will be communicating with our HTML file is to create a script tag just inside the body of our HTML. Call that the script. And link our JS file here by typing in the source, src, and the file name, script.js. There we go. Now the script.js and index.html files knows that they are communicating. The way that we can address certain elements in our HTML inside our JS file is by using getElements, or then we shoot it to you. Let's create a variable and name it Dino. And in our Dino, what we want to address is this specific right here, this specific div element with an ID of Dino. So the way we can do that is type in document, which will refer to our HTML document, and type in getElement by ID. Now you can already see that there are other ways to address HTML elements. We can get them by class name. We can also address them by tags and other stuff also. The one that we're going to use this time is by ID. And let's just type in the ID of our HTML element. And now, whatever we do with our Dino variable will be applied in our Dino HTML element. Now let's go ahead and address all of the other HTML elements that we will use frequently in our JS file. And the ones that we will be using are the Dino elements, the bump elements, our start button, our dragon button, and our game div here, right here. Okay, now we also want to create another variable, and let's name it is jumping, so that we will know if our Dino friend right here is jumping or not. So let's just make that a boolean and give it a default value of false, an initial value of false, and another variable that will keep our score. And let's give that an initial value of 0. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create event listeners for our buttons. Now, what are events? Events are just actions done in our page. In this case, we are calling an event. We are listening for any click events that will be done on our button. And once we hear or sense this click event, we are going to call this function start game, which we are going to create now. This function start game, once we have clicked the start button, we are going to change the display of the start button to none, which means it will disappear from the display. And the same still with the dragon button, it will still be displayed as none. But now we are changing the game div style to block instead of display none. Right here, if you can remember that the style display is none, this will be changed to block once we've clicked the button. And then we are we are setting the initial positions of our dino and bump to 150 pixels and 480 pixels respectively, the dino from the top position and the bump from the left position, meaning it will start 480 pixels from the left of our viewport or our page. And we are setting the bump style animation to a total of 1.5 seconds. We're also setting the score to 0. And now we want our page to listen to more clicks in our page, in which case we will call the jump function, or we will make our dino jump. Now, since we want our dino to jump, let's create that function right here. And now we're checking that if our dino is jumping, we create the boolean that we created earlier to true instead of false, because we cannot make our dino jump if it is already jumping. So we're checking that right here. And we are changing the class of our dino to animate, the one that we created earlier in our CSS file. This one right here, we are applying this animation to our dino. And if we run out of time for the animation, let's say it is already lapsed, we will remove that animation from our dino. Now, other than making sure that our dino is jumping, we would also want to check if we are still in the game or if we haven't lost yet. So let's create that function, which is check that, and we've already called this function right at the start of our game, right here. So what we're doing right here is we're saving the position of our dino here. We are calling it and getting the property of the top, the value of the top, the position of it. And we're doing the same thing with our bump, the position of our bump, because those two are the things that we are going to compare to check if they haven't collided yet. And that's exactly what we are doing here. And if our two images have collided, meaning its positions overlap to some degree, we are changing the try again button display to block, meaning we're making it visible, and our game div to none, which means that we are making it invisible. And we are calling in an alert, which is simply a text box that will appear in our page and print this message right here, which is game over. Your score is, and we wanted to print the score that we've generated over our game. Now, the way that we can increment our score is, let's make sure first that these are indented properly. And this one as well. We are creating another function that will make us game score, and we're calling it increment score. What it does simply is it just adds 1 to our score. And if we ever lost out of the game or we've ran out, our two images have collided, we want to be able to try again. And the way we can do that is we're creating another function, and let's name it try again function. Let's indent it properly. And we are changing the display of the try again button to none, because that means that we've already clicked it, and we are calling the start game function again. And we know that our try again button will be listening to any clicks that will be done to it, and we're calling this try again function. So that will be it for the functionalities in our JavaScript. And so let's try it in our web page. Let's go into our index.html file and open it with live server. Now it's the moment of truth. Well, let's try our game. And now it is working. We know that whenever I click, the dino jumps, but whenever they collide, to some degree, we are getting this alert box, and we're printing out our message, game over, and sadly, my score is just 3. So that would be it for our game. Let's just click OK on this, and now we can see that we are able to see this try again button again. Let's click it, and now we're back in the game, and I still lost. So that will be it for our jumping dino game. I hope you enjoyed this video and try it out for yourselves. Bye.